could not physically distance would need to wear masks in order to prevent the spread. Like when you see those images of Ambassador Birx going in with a mask on, the primary reason that she's wearing that mask is to limit her spreading the virus if she has it, you know? So that's the important thing, and so that you're decreasing the amount of virus in the environment.
And we're seeing, Sanjay, a case study. I mean, the White House engages in surveillance testing, which is just random testing of individuals at the White House. That's how they found out that some of the people had it. They're engaging in contact tracing, figuring out who the people who have tested positive have come in contact with. And there is this robust testing program inside the White House, but the president keeps downplaying the need for a nationwide testing program like that so that your children or my children or people who want to go to work are able to also keep hold of who has the virus. Take a listen to White House Senior Advisor Kevin Hassett yesterday on State of the Union. Why not? Why not implement a nationwide aggressive testing and contact tracing system? What's the downside?
No, there is no downside. In fact, we should use every single test that we can generate, and that's something that we're working overtime on, ramping up testing.
But Sanjay, there's no downside, Mr. Hassett says, but they're not doing it. They're not invoking the Defense Production Act to get all the reagents and the swabs and the, I mean, it's just one of the most bizarre things about this entire pandemic.
Yeah, it really is, Jake. I mean, it was a good interview. I watched that interview, and you know, I think he was being honest. I mean, look, you see what's happening inside the White House. They're testing. Some people are being tested every day. They recognize the value of testing in terms of trying to contain this at the White House, trying to contact trace, do all the things to contain this. That's a microcosm of larger institutions, a microcosm of cities and states and even the whole country. I mean, that's what needs to be done. And yeah, why haven't we?
But consulting with mayors and others, make those decisions based on what's happening on the ground in their place. I mean, in Bismarck, North Dakota, they did 620 tests last weekend. 6 people that didn't have any symptoms were the only ones that tested positive. So Bismarck is clearly different than Minneapolis, which is clearly different than New York. And I think that we need to continue to localize the response, because we can't simply shut down the entire economy, leave it shut down, while there are many places in our country that are prepared to go back to work and grow the economy.
You know, there are all sorts of statistical models used, and it seems like a very crass, if not macabre, way to figure out the numbers. So when I hear, you know, we're over 80,000 deaths in this country, and some models have it climbing 130 to 140,000, what do you think of that?
Well, it's concerning for sure, but Neil, you know, we could outlaw driving and save 40,000 people's lives every year from traffic accidents. We could outlaw alcohol and save 80,000 Americans' lives, because that's how many alcohol-related deaths there are in this country. And so every death is a tragedy, every life is worth saving, but part of saving the life is, you know, having an economy that provides, that not only provides a job and the revenue stream for families, but oftentimes their health insurance provides them the opportunity to have, you know, other safer vehicles, safer homes. So it's not a single thing. The economy is very dynamic and is an important part of our mental health, our confidence. So I think we have to, you know, look at it all in the whole and not as an isolated disease. Granted, it is different than other things. Granted, it is contagious and highly infectious, but it shouldn't scare us out of living our lives, and that's what I'm afraid it's done.
President Obama went out of his way, when there were questions about the vaccine that had been developed, to get himself photographed getting a shot, which was unusual for a president at that time. But President Trump is not modeling the kind of behavior that's going to be necessary for a safe opening of the economy either.
Actually, Parker, I want to ask you about some of your reporting that backs up a lot of what Ben Rhodes is saying, the political backdrop that seems to charge every news event, every public utterance, and every leak that comes from this inner circle around the president that's now facing infection and quarantine of their own. And it sounds like a little bit of, more than a little bit of peer pressure about wearing masks, which, as Dr. Gupta said, is one of the most protective and preventive things people can do. You and your colleagues described Donald Trump as glum about his own unpopularity. Please detail that reporting.
Sure. What we heard for our weekend story was the president, and you can agree or disagree with this assessment he had, but had originally thought he was on a glide path to re-election against Joe Biden. He was running on the economy largely. It was a strong economy until the coronavirus hit, and he now feels sort of shell-shocked, it was described to us, glum and shell-shocked, that he's now losing to Joe Biden in just about every single internal and external public poll. He's very sensitive, and his whole team is very sensitive when those private polls leak, but they are leaking. There's some metrics against Biden where he does better, someone who's the job creator who might be better on the economy, but on the one metric that matters, who are you going to vote for, who do you support? Biden is winning, and he sort of feels like he's locked in the White House. He can't get out on the campaign trail as he wants. There was talk about maybe starting to get him back out to do rallies in August, maybe outdoor rallies, but who knows? And so he feels like he is out of control with these circumstances beyond his own making. He sits there, as we saw this weekend, watching cable news. The news cycles are all bad because we're in the middle of a deadly pandemic that in many ways has been mismanaged, tweeting, getting upset, and is just incredibly frustrated. And he understands that his reelection hopes are very much tied to the economy, which right now is not doing particularly.
An announcement on coronavirus testing.
In Wisconsin, we have a viewer off of Twitter.
To provide an update on the unprecedented testing capacity developed by the United States, the most advanced and robust testing system anywhere in the world, by far. This afternoon, I'll also announce new steps that we're taking to make tests even more widely available. To battle the virus, my administration marshaled every resource at our nation's disposal: public, private, military, economic, scientific, and industrial, all at your disposal. We launched the largest manufacturing ramp-up since the Second World War. There's been nothing like it since. At the center of this industrial and scientific mobilization was the development of our coronavirus testing capabilities. In the span of just a few short months, we've developed a testing capacity unmatched and unrivaled anywhere in the world, and it's not even close. This is a core element of our plan to safely and gradually reopen America, and we're opening and we're starting, and there's enthusiasm like I haven't seen in a long time. Every American should be proud of the amazing array of talent, skill, and enterprise our nation has brought to this challenge. In 3 months, the FDA has authorized more than 92 different tests, and over 9 million have been performed here in the United States. 3 weeks ago, we were conducting roughly 150,000 tests per day. Now we're doing approximately 300,000 tests per day, a increase, and it will go up substantially from that number. This week, the United States will pass 10 million tests conducted, nearly double the number of any other country. We're testing more people per capita than South Korea, the United Kingdom, France, Japan, Sweden, Finland, and many other countries, and in some cases combined. On Friday, coronavirus antigen test, an alternative testing technology that can be much more readily manufactured. KDLT Corporation, which makes this newly authorized point-of-care test, estimates that it will be able to manufacture 150,000 tests per day, immediately increasing to 300,000 tests per day within just a few weeks. Immediately increasing to 300,000 tests per day within just a few weeks. To further expand our nation's testing capabilities, this afternoon I am announcing that my administration is, and we've got this all approved, it's all done, is sending $1 billion to America's states, territories, and tribes. So this has all been approved, we've gotten it done, completed, the money is going. I said from the beginning that the federal government would back up the states and help them build their testing capability and capacities, and that's exactly what's happened. This partnership has truly flourished. We have really had a very good relationship with the states and the governors and other representatives within the states, a relationship like I think I can honestly say has not been seen in this country for many, many years. The governors and us are working together very closely, not only on testing, but on ventilators, where we have a capacity that's at this point virtually unlimited. And we're sending ventilators, as you probably heard from other countries. We're sending many, many thousands of ventilators to other countries because they're in tremendous need. And I think building up a lot of goodwill, but much more importantly than that, we're saving a lot of lives. Most states are now doing a great job. My administration located 5,000 machines in 700 labs across all 50 states, and governors have learned how to maximize these testing resources. The federal government is also supporting states with vital supplies, quick approvals of new tests, and one-on-one coaching from the team here at the White House on how to increase capacity and increase it very quickly. In recent weeks, we've held multiple conference calls with every state, as well as with DC and Puerto Rico. We jointly developed testing projections and goals for each state for the month of May, altogether totaling 12.9 million tests. Think of that, 12.9 million tests. Today I'm announcing that my administration will provide the collection supplies to help states meet their targets and meet them rapidly. During the month of May, FEMA and HHS will be delivering 12.9 million swabs to states nationwide. We already have them. The delivery will be very quick. We're prepared to provide millions of additional swabs if any state is on a pace to surpass its goal. And their goals are very high. We've set them very high. We've told them to set them very high. My administration will also provide approximately 9 million transport media, which are used to transfer swabs to the lab processing, a complicated process, but we've made it simple. As a result of these actions, every single state will be able to test more people per capita in May alone than South Korea has tested in 4 months since the outbreak began. This major commitment is possible because of the massive mobilization of American industry, including Puritan Medical Products, U.S. Cotton, Abbott Labs, and Thermo Fisher. Some of these incredible companies produce rapidly for us, and their products are here with us this afternoon. These are all different products that were literally just developed. And if you can imagine that, and these are the best machines and the best equipment anywhere in the world, and other countries are calling us, and we're trying to work as much as we can, not only on ventilators, but also with testing. My administration also continues our tireless effort to expand testing in the most underserved communities. Through our partnership with the private sector, leading pharmacies and retailers are now operating over 240 testing sites across the country, and that's in addition to all of the other sites that we have working. 70% of these sites are located in communities with unique vulnerabilities. There will be more than 300 sites by the end of this week, and retailers are making plans to open up hundreds and hundreds more locations within the next 30 days. These additional sites are helping us ensure access to testing in every community. My administration is fighting relentlessly to protect all citizens of every color and creed from this terrible virus, the invisible enemy. In addition to vast amounts of testing supplies, my administration has partnered with the private sector to coordinate the delivery of more than 90 million N95 masks, and these are of the highest quality. Many are made right here in the United States, a capacity we didn't have at all at the beginning. 126 million surgical masks, likewise many are made here. 9 million face shields, 21 million surgical gowns, 993 million gloves, and 10,690 ventilators. We're building thousands of ventilators in numerous plants all across our country. It's incredible, actually. This global pandemic has inflicted great pain and hardship on our people. It should have never been allowed to happen. It should have been stopped at the source. We mourn for every life the virus has claimed, and we share the grief of all of you who have lost a loved one, and that goes worldwide too. Many, many countries, 184 countries at least. Thanks to the courage of our citizens and our aggressive strategy, hundreds of thousands of lives have been saved. And we have saved, and if you look at on a per 100,000 basis, we're at the best part of the pack, right on the bottom. Germany and us are leading the world. Germany and the United States are leading the world. Lives saved per 100,000. In every generation, through every challenge and hardship and danger, America has risen to the task. We have met the moment, and we have prevailed. Americans do whatever it takes to find solutions, pioneer breakthroughs, and harness the energies we need to achieve a total victory. Day after day, we're making tremendous strides with the dedication of our doctors and nurses. These are incredible people. These are brave people. These are warriors. With the devotion of our manufacturing workers, food suppliers, and lab technicians, and with the profound patriotism of the American people, we will defeat this horrible enemy. We will revive our economy, and we will transition into greatness. That's a phrase you're going to hear a lot because that's what's going to happen. We're going into the third quarter, and we're going to do well. In the fourth quarter, we're going to do very good, and next year I think we're going to have one of the best years we've ever had because there's a tremendous pent-up demand. It's a demand, and I'm feeling it. I've felt things a lot over my life, and I've made a lot of good calls. It's a demand like I don't think I've ever seen. There's a pent-up demand. There's a spirit in this country like few have seen. And I think you can say, and we've helped a lot of the countries a lot, really a lot. There's a tremendous spirit all over the world to beat this terrible, terrible thing. But we're transitioning to greatness, and the greatness is going to be in the fourth quarter, but it's really going to be next year, and it's going to be a year like we've never had before. I really believe that as good as we've done, and we've done great, we had the best economy in the history of the world, not just here, but anywhere in the world. You can talk China, you can talk any other country. We had the best economy anywhere in the world, and we were going for numbers, whether it was unemployment numbers, where we had our best numbers, employment also numbers, a little different, where we had our best numbers, almost 160 million people. All of that, we had the greatest stock market numbers ever. I think we had 142 days where we set records. In a short period of time, 152 days, we set records in the stock market. We rebuilt our military, all built in the United States. All of our equipment built, $1.5 trillion plus. On the southern border, the wall is being built. It's being built rapidly, and now you don't hear the opponents talking too much about the border. They don't like to talk about it because it seemed that we were right on a lot of things. One of the things we were right about, one of the many things, was the border. We have a very powerful border now. We had one of the best weeks in the history of our border between the United States and Mexico, our southern border. We had very few people coming in, very, very few, almost record low numbers. And the wall is being built. It's up to 181 miles already. It's being built rapidly. People don't talk about it anymore because it's very successful. And the area where the wall has built, that is a lot still, but we want to be up to 450 by very next year. We should be up to 450, and very shortly after that, over 500 miles to be completed. But it's had a tremendous impact. But again, we've had the best numbers. The last thing we want now with this pandemic is for people to come across our southern border. And again, we're doing record numbers, meaning record low numbers. So I just want to introduce Admiral Guar. If you could, please come up, and Brad, if you would, Brad Smith. And they're going to do a little explaining as to what we've done with regard to testing and how successful it's been. And then we'll take some questions after that. Thank you very much. Maybe you'll both stay there. Could be some questions. Okay, please, John, go ahead.
You can't hear me. We had a situation here at the White House on Friday where a member of the Vice President's staff tested positive for coronavirus, which has now caused 3 of the top U.S. officials involved in the coronavirus response to self-isolate. Two-part question. Where did the system break down to allow that to happen? And what would you say to employers to look at the experience here at the White House and say, are we ready for this?
I don't think the system broke down at all. One person tested positive, surprisingly, because the previous day tested negative. And 3 people that were in contact, relative contact, who I believe they've all tested totally negative, but they are going to, for a period of time, self-isolate, so that's not breaking down. It can happen. It's the hidden enemy. Remember that. It's the hidden enemy. So things happen, but the 3 tested negative. The one who tested positive will be fine. It will be absolutely fine. Yeah, John?
And what do you say, Mr. President, to other companies who may look at this and say, I don't know if we're ready for all?
Well, I think, we have a lot of people in the White House, and we had one. Basically, we had one person. So we had a lot of people that work here. This building is shocking if you looked at the numbers, and it's also tremendous numbers of people coming in. Normally, you wouldn't do that. But because we're running a country, we want to keep our country running. So we have a lot of people coming in and out. Many of those people, most of those people are tested depending on what portion of the Oval Office area they're going in. Everybody coming into the President's office gets tested. And I felt no vulnerability whatsoever, John. But the 2 people, as I said, and 3 people they have been tested and it's negative, and they'll be probably out of quarantine very quickly. Okay?
John? If I can follow up on that, your staff, your senior staff, as you just referenced, is able to get tested every day. When will it be that Americans across the country will be able to get tested every day as they go back to work?
Very soon. I mean, really very soon. It's an interesting question because normally you would have said that you are not tested, and you would have been, knocking us for not getting tested. So if we get tested, it's a problem, and if we don't get tested, it's a problem. But I like the way your question was phrased better this way, because it is a positive. We are tested. We have great capability. You look at all of these machines here. They're incredible machines that are the best anywhere in the world. No place in the world has this kind of equipment. Other countries are calling, sophisticated countries, and they're calling lots of countries. And we're trying to make as much as we can available to them, because there's nothing like what we've been able to do in literally a couple of months. What they've been able to do, the private sector, how they got it done. This is a 5 to 15 minute test, as an example, the Abbott Laboratories test. These tests are highly sophisticated, very quick, very good. This is things that didn't even exist a short while ago. So we do have a great testing capability. At the White House, we're doing it. And I think, generally speaking, we had a call with the governors the other day. Generally speaking, without exception, they were all extremely happy with what's going on with respect to their testing. Okay?
But should people be told to go back to work until they have that assurance that they and their co-workers are able to get a test, which we're still not there?
We're leaving that up to the governors, as you know, and if we see something wrong, we'll call them out and we'll stop it. But we are leaving it up to the governors. Some are being not aggressive enough, in my opinion, and some are being a little bit aggressive, but they're being very careful. And the people of the country, they've learned a lot over the last 2 months. They've learned about social distancing and washing your hands and other things that we've all learned and talked about. They've learned about, I see just about everybody has a face mask on. They've learned about masks, the good and the bad, by the way. It's not a one-sided thing, believe it or not. But our country has learned. Our country has been incredible. And you see the numbers, they're dropping very substantially. The numbers are dropping around our country very, very substantially. So we leave that, John, up to the governors, and I think they're making a lot of good decisions. We've had, as I said, a great relationship with governors, Democrat and Republican, and I think overall they're making very good decisions. Nobody in this group. All the ones behind the rope, that's interesting. Please.
Thank you, Mr. President. You said in your comments earlier, we have met the moment, we have prevailed. To you, sir, is the mission accomplished, even with 1.4 million?
No, we prevailed on testing is what I'm referring to. That was with regard to testing. You never prevail when you have 90,000 people, 100,000 people, when you have 80,000 people as of today, when you have the kind of death you're talking about, when you have potentially millions of people throughout the world that are dying, that's not prevail. What I'm talking about is we have a great testing capacity now. It's getting even better. There's nobody close to us in the world, and we certainly have done a great job on testing. And testing is a very big, important function. By the way, some people consider it more important than others, to be honest with you. But testing certainly is a very important function, and we have prevailed. We have the best equipment anywhere in the world. Okay, please. Yeah. Please, go ahead.
There are a variety of reports that Chinese hackers are attempting to steal technology related to vaccine research. Is this something you're concerned about? What can you say?
So what else is new with China? What else is new? Tell me. I'm not happy with China. They should have stopped this at the source. They could have stopped it right at the source. So now you're telling me they're hacking. So I just say this, Steve, what else is new? We're watching it very closely.
If I could follow up, sir, the South China Morning Post, the Beijing newspaper, says that China would like to reopen negotiations on the trade deal to make the terms more favorable to them. Is this something you'd be interested in doing?
No, not at all. Not even a little bit, no. I'm not interested. We signed a deal. I had heard that too. They'd like to reopen the trade talk to make it a better deal for them. China's been taking advantage of the United States for many, many years, for decades, because we had people at this position right here where I'm standing, sitting right in that office, the Oval Office, that allowed that to happen. No, I'm not interested in that. Let's see if they live up to the deal that they signed. Okay? Please, go ahead.
Mr. President, what are your thoughts about a second round of direct payments to Americans that's included in the House Democratic bill?
Well, we're talking about that with a lot of different people. I want to see a payroll tax cut. I want to see various things that we want. I want the workers to be taken care of. But we are talking about that. We're negotiating with the Democrats. We'll see what happens. But as I said, it's a transition, and this is really going to be, in my opinion, we'll see. But I think it's going to be something that's going to be very special. It's a transition to greatness. And greatness is next year, right from the beginning. I think we're going to do fantastically well. I view the third quarter, as I said, as a transition quarter. Could be pretty good, but a transition quarter. Toward the end of the fourth quarter, you're going to see some numbers that are going to be tremendous, I think. And next year, you're going to have potentially the kind of numbers that you saw before, and maybe even better, because there is that pent-up demand that is... a lot of people wanted to do things, they were ready to do things, and they've had to hold back because of the virus. So I think you're going to have, with that pent-up demand, a phenomenal year next year. Unless somebody messes it up by coming along and raising taxes, doubling, tripling, quadrupling your taxes, like a certain party, namely the Democrats, want to do, you'll mess it all up. We had the greatest in the world. I presided, this administration presided over it. It got great for a reason. And we'll do it again, and we'll do it again very quickly and very easily. I see that happening. Yes, ma'am, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Almost everyone, as you noted, in the Rose Garden is wearing a mask today. Why haven't you required everyone at the White House to wear masks before now?
Well, if they're a certain distance from me, or if they're a certain distance from each other, they do. In the case of me, I'm not close to anybody. I'd like to be close to these two gentlemen. They're hard-working, great men, but they just said, frankly, let's keep it this way. So obviously, in my case, I'm very far away from everyone. But if you look at all of those people over there, every one of them, from what I see, these are White House staffers, they're White House representatives, they're White House executives, and everybody has a mask on. We've had just about everybody I've seen today has worn a mask. Yeah.
Were you the one who required that, sir?
Yeah, I did. I required it, yes. Please, go ahead.
Mr. President, you're now promising that everyone who needs a test will be able to get one at some point soon. Can you give us some figures on what you're changing to ramp up testing? When will that be a true statement exactly? And how exactly are you going to accomplish that?
Well, it's a true statement already. We have more testing than any country in the world by far, but I'll let Admiral go into a little bit of the future.
When you look at the testing numbers that we worked with collaboratively with the state leadership, it's not just with the governor, but the state health officers, the state epidemiologists, the public health labs, it's really a combination of testing those who need something for diagnosis, diagnostic testing, tracing, so testing those who have been around the people with a diagnosis. Action of that is really moving into surveillance. That is testing those who are asymptomatic. And when you do the numbers, this amount of testing on a state-to-state basis really is in the range that we need to accomplish all of that, certainly within the range that we It's those three things. The other thing I would say is, particularly as we move into the summer, there are surveillance mechanisms, and I talked about them before, like a weather radar. And just think about that weather radar. The influenza-like illness network, which is at about 75% of healthcare institutions. The influenza-like illness network, which is at about 75% of healthcare institutions, and syndromic surveillance. So if we see a blip on that weather radar, combined with CDC personnel in every single state and with contact tracers, we really run to the fire, right? And that's when you...
President, there does seem to be a double standard here, Mr. President, where members of your own staff can get tests frequently when they need it, but ordinary Americans cannot. So when will the rest of America have the same access that members of your own White House have to testing?
And you know what? If we didn't get the tests, if we did no tests in the White House, you'd be up complaining, why aren't you getting tests for the White House? See, we can't win, because if we didn't get the tests, you'd be up. I understand you very well, better than you understand yourself. And frankly, if we didn't get tests done, you'd be up complaining about the fact that we didn't have the tests done. Now that we're doing so well on tests, and so quick and so fast, 5 minutes, etc., and so accurate, you're complaining that we're getting too many tests. So you can't win. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, Mr. President, many Americans want to return to their normal lives, but they're afraid to do so. How can you ensure Americans that it's safe to go to their own workplaces when the most secure workplace in the country, the White House, cannot contain the spread of the coronavirus that's infected some of your own staff?
Well, when you say some, so we have a person, and the person got, something happened right after a test was done. 3 other people met that person, came into relative contact, very little contact, and they're self-quarantining. That is not exactly not controlling it. I think we've controlled it very well. We have hundreds and hundreds of people a day pouring into the White House. It's a massive office complex, including the very large building right behind us that you know so well. So I think we're really doing a very good job in watching it, and I think it's very well contained, actually. And part of the reason it is because of all the tests we're able to give. But it was one person, and the other people were only people. They're quarantined. You understand this, Phil. They're quarantined for a specific reason. The reason is they were in the general proximity of the one person. And the one person, I believe, will be fine in a very short period of time.
Why hasn't Vice President Pence followed the CDC guidelines of self-isolation and other people who might have been exposed
well,
to
that I'm going to have to ask that. He will give you that information. Whatever he is proceeding and doing, he will give you that information. I'll make sure that they put out a notice. John, go ahead, please.
Mr. President, up until now, it's thought that the most vulnerable people were those above the age of 60 or 70 or 80, and the children were pretty much, I don't want to say immune from this, but weren't affected by it. But all day long in the news today, we have been hearing and seeing this terrible syndrome that some 85 children have now. 3 of them have died. What is the task force talking about in terms of that, and what could be done about it?
Yeah, we're seeing that all over the world now with young children. Very, very tiny percentage, but it's still, it's the swelling and the skin rash, and we're looking at that very closely, John. It's a phenomena that's just been brought to everyone's attention a couple of weeks ago. Admiral, you may have something to say about that.
So thank you for pointing that out. And again, I've said many times, I'm a pediatrician and a pediatric ICU doctor. This syndrome, which we call, or similar to Kawasaki syndrome, it has been seen in a novel coronavirus before, and it's associated with illnesses. So we have a very strong activation on this. We do know treatments for this, but the CDC is interacting actively with the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit network to create case definitions and to understand how this is going and if there are predispositions. The National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, I spoke to Dr. Gary Gibbons, who directs that, who is advancing many research projects based on that. The ASPR, the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, has a team out in several areas looking at if there are any special treatments. We know what the basic treatment is, but this is a little bit different than we normally see. So there really is an activation among all the branches within HHS, working with networks at children's hospitals and ICU nets. It is a small percentage, but it is quite frightening. And this reflects the fact that this virus affects the vasculature. We see clotting, we see strokes. And this is a vascular phenomenon of inflammation we see in children.
President, with this newly emerging syndrome now among young children, what do you say to parents who would like to get their children back to school but are now looking at this and potentially afraid to do that?
Well, again, it's a tiny percentage, but you're right. So we're looking into it very strongly. And the Admiral, as he said, he's known about this for long before this happened. But it is a very, very small percentage. And people recover from that. The children recover from that. Right?
Yes, sir. Most do recover from this, but it is a serious and it can be a fatal condition. So we do want to make sure that parents understand that high fevers, red rashes, particularly in your child, you may need to contact your healthcare provider. There are treatments for this. They work very effectively if gotten early, at least for the vast majority of the cases.
We're studying that very closely, and it's been on the radar for weeks, actually, because we've seen this for quite a while. But it's been very rare, but we're looking at it very closely. It's very important to us. I think one of the things we're most proud of is this just came out, deaths per 100,000 people, death. So deaths per 100,000 people, Germany and the United States are at the lowest rung of that ladder, meaning low is a positive, not a negative. Germany and the United States are the two best in deaths per 100,000 people, which frankly to me that's perhaps the most important number there is. Please go in the back, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I have two questions, one on the Ahmaud Arbery case and one on the coronavirus. The first on the coronavirus, the vice president is said to be in some sort of self-isolating, keeping his distance from people. What do you say to Americans who say, how can you keep me safe? How can you reopen the government if even the vice president is self-isolating? And why hasn't testing gotten up to the point where every American who wants a test can get a test?
Well, the vice president, first of all, has been tested, and he's negative, and it was tested yesterday, tested today, and he's negative. He's in very good shape, and I think that that's going to be fine. As far as Americans getting a test, they should all be able to get a test right now. They should be able to get a test. That's the problem with a question like that. We go through a whole announcement saying we're #1 in the world by far, by a factor of 2 and even 3 and 4, depending on where you're looking. And I get a question, when will everybody be able to get tested? If somebody wants to be tested right now, they'll be able to be tested. As far as the incident, I think it's horrible, and it's certainly being looked at by many people. I'm speaking to many people about it. I saw the picture of him in his tuxedo. It was so beautiful. I mean, he looks like a wonderful young guy. Would have been a wonderful, just a wonderful guy. I think it's a horrible thing. I think it's a horrible thing. Now, with that being said, as you know, they're studying the case very carefully. They're interviewing everybody involved, and we'll see what happens. To me, it's a very sad thing. I spoke to a number of people that are very much involved in it. I've been following that one very closely. It breaks your heart to watch it. It breaks your heart. And certainly the video was a terrible looking video to me. But you have a lot of people looking at it, and hopefully an answer is going to be arrived at very quickly. But it's something that is heartbreaking.
A question about the case, if I could ask it. The specific question I have is, you said that there possibly are things that happened that were not recorded on the tape. Could you expound on what you mean by that and your thoughts on?
Well, I saw the tape, and when they moved left, I don't believe when they moved left outside of the tape, nobody saw what was going on. Nobody saw it's an empty spot on the tape, I guess. Now, do they have additional tapes? I hope. But I will say that it's something that, based on what I saw, doesn't look good. Somebody that I have a lot of respect for is Senator Scott of South Carolina. You know who I'm talking about. He's a great gentleman. He's a great senator. He's a great gentleman. Tim Scott. And I called him 2 days ago. I said, Tim, what do you think? Tell me. What do you think? He's very disturbed by it. He's very disturbed. And I'm very disturbed also. Please, go ahead.
President Trump, thank you. I have two questions, one on testing and one on Democratic states that you tweeted about. First, the money for this new testing support today comes from the CARES Act, which you signed into law 42 days ago. Did your delay in embracing widespread testing have anything to do with a desire to suppress the official number of U.S. cases and deaths as you try to reopen the country?
No, we just wanted to make sure that we had the proper machinery, apparatus, and everything else out there before people started wasting money. So, method of saving money. We want to make sure we had even things like this. Plus, they have machines that are far more complex than this. They have massive machines at some of the laboratories that can do millions of tests. We want to make sure everything was in place. Okay, go ahead.
And earlier today, you tweeted that Democrats are moving slowly for political purposes. Why do you believe that their motive is politics rather than public safety? And how do you respond to criticism that you're also motivated by politics to try to grow the economy ahead of the election?
Well, I think that if you look at Pennsylvania as an example, if you look at various other states, I won't get into them, the people want to go back. The numbers are getting to a point where they can, and there just seems to be no effort on certain blue states to get back into gear, and the people aren't going to stand for it. They want to get back. They're not going to stand for it. They want our country open. I want our country open too. I want it open safely, but I want it open. Don't forget, people are dying the other route. You can go with the enclosed route. Everything's closed up. You're in your house. You're not allowed to move. People are dying with that too. You look at drug addiction. You look at suicides. You look at some of the things that are taking place. People are dying that way too. You could make the case it's in even greater numbers. So it's a situation that some people, and I've noticed that some states could be moving more quickly, and also at the same time safety. Look, safety is paramount, but people are dying in the lockdown position too. And everybody understands that. They're just starting to find out. And look at what's going on with drugs, and look at what's happening with suicides. Yeah, please. Please go ahead.
Hi, Mr. President. So Americans have been self-quarantining for several months now, social distancing, yet we're still seeing about 20,000 new cases a day, 1,000 to 2,000 deaths. Is there anything else the administration is planning to do to get these new cases under control? Because we seem to be on a plateau. Or is this just
well, excuse me, the 20,000, the numbers are way down from what they were 2 weeks ago. I mean, the numbers are really coming down, and very substantially. This weekend was one of the lowest we've had. This is, the numbers are coming down very rapidly, all throughout the country, by the way. There may be one exception, but all throughout the country, the numbers are coming down rapidly. I think you see that, Admiral.
But now 130,000 cases that go through August. Do you agree with those models? Is that your expectation
Well,
as well?
the models haven't been exactly accurate. These are models done by a lot of think tanks, a lot of universities. You look at some of the models, they've been way off. A few of the models have been accurate, but as far as the models are concerned, if you go by the model, we were going to lose 2.2 million people. And because we mitigated, we did things that were very tough for our country to do, frankly. We had to turn off our whole magnificent economy. We had to turn down the whole country. We're at the lowest of all of the models. I mean, if you look at, I guess the 100 to 120,000 people would be at the low side. And we're at, there's nothing low. Look, nothing low. One is too many people. And I say it all the time. One person to lose for this is too many people. It's a disgrace what happened. But if you look at the models, we're at the lowest of those projections. But the models are not models done necessarily by the White House. They're models done by many people all over the world. And if you take the most respected of those people, many of those models are wrong. I mean, they've been wrong as far as the U.S. is concerned, because those numbers are nowhere near what was projected potentially.
Expectation of what the death toll is going to look like by the summer,
You know what? I don't want to think about it even. I know that we're doing everything we can. We're doing a good job. We acted very early. We acted extremely early in keeping China out of our country and banning people from China coming in other than our citizens, which we obviously had to take, and they were quarantined or watched carefully. They were tested. They were watched very carefully. But we had about 40,000 people coming in from China, from Asia, And we had to obviously take the people. Can you imagine if I said, you're a U.S. citizen, we're not going to take you? That doesn't work. So, but they were very carefully. I was with Ron DeSantis. He said they literally put the people that came in from China in quarantine for a substantial period of time. No, that was a big decision. I think we saved hundreds of thousands of lives by acting very early. And when I did this, I think the Admiral can say it, everybody was against my doing it. Everybody was. The professionals, the doctors. I was pretty much by myself on that one. And it was a lucky thing we did it because we saved hundreds of thousands of lives. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Earlier today, the Vice President urged governors to have all their nursing home residents tested. Why not just mandate that? Why not require that? Have you considered that?
Well, I would certainly consider that. I will mandate it if you'd like. I think it's important to do, and I think, frankly, some of the governors were very lax with respect to nursing homes. It was obvious right from the beginning. The state of Washington, where 26 or 28 people died very early on, and I would have said nursing homes, and I did say nursing homes. That's what they should. Now, some of the states, many of the states are doing that, but I think all of the states should be. They have the capacity to do it. They should be doing nursing home. That is a real vulnerability.
The two staffers that were announced last week as testing positive, are you aware of any additional White House staff?
No, not at all. I'm only aware of people that saw them, were tested, the tests were negative, and they're quarantining anyway. So, please, go ahead.
Mr. President. I wanted to ask, are you now or are you considering separating some more with Vice President Pence as a precautionary measure?
Well, first of all, the job he's done on task force, the job he's done, frankly, as the Vice President of the United States has been outstanding. And he's a warrior, too, just like doctors and nurses. I mean, he is working so hard, and he's coming into contact with a lot of people. But again, he tested negative, so we have to understand that. But he comes into contact with a lot of people. It's something probably during this quarantine period we'll probably talk about. I have not seen him since then, but I would say that he and I will be talking about that. Yeah, we can talk on the phone.
For Admiral Giroir, if I could. The President just said that Dr. Fauci, Dr. Hahn have tested negative. Then why do they need to be isolated? Is there some concern that they could be spreading the virus in some way? Is there a concern about the testing? Why do they need to isolate?
So this is a very fundamental concept, and I'm so happy you brought that up because it underlies a lot of the questions here. If you test negative just at that one point, that just means you've tested negative for that point in time. We know that the incubation period for this virus can be many days. So the CDC guidelines really says that if you're in close contact, just testing negative on that one day doesn't mean you won't be positive later on. So the prudent and the recommended thing to do is to self-isolate yourself for the entire period of incubation and really then some. So that's what they're doing. It's a precautionary manner because they were negative. We all hope that they remain negative, but if they turn positive in a day or two or became symptomatic, that's still possible even with a negative test.
Okay, thank you, sir. Go ahead, Phil.
Mr. President, in one of your Mother's Day tweets, you appear to accuse President Obama of the biggest political crime in American history by far. Those were your words. What crime exactly are you accusing President Obama of committing, and do you believe the Justice Department should prosecute him?
Obamagate. It's been going on for a long time. It's been going on from before I even got elected, and it's a disgrace that it happened. And if you look at what's gone on, and if you look at now all of this information that's being released, and from what I understand, that's only the beginning. Some terrible things happened, and it should never be allowed to happen in our country again. And you'll be seeing what's going on over the coming weeks. And I wish you'd write honestly about it, but unfortunately, you choose not to do so. Yeah, John, please.
Right. What is the crime exactly that you're accusing him of?
You know what the crime is. The crime is very obvious to everybody. All you have to do is read the newspapers, except yours. John, please.
Yeah, Mr. President, if I can just get a clarification on the testing. We've seen clearly that the numbers of tests have gone up. There have been some advancements in testing. But you said twice here today that every American who wants a test can get a test.
Yes.
That's not the case. 1.9 million tests per day is far short of every American that wants a test to be able to
Well,
get
I'm
it.
going to have the admiral, but I will say just from listening and hearing like you do, we all do, not everybody should get a test because they have to have certain things and they're going to know when they're not feeling right. Those are the people that will be getting the test, but Admiral, I'll let you take it from there, please.
So everybody who needs a test can get a test. We have plenty of tests for that. Right now in America, anybody who needs a test can get a test in America with the numbers we have. If you are symptomatic with a respiratory illness, that is an indication for a test and you can get a test. If you need to be contact traced, you can get a test. And we hope, and not hope, we are starting to have asymptomatic surveillance, which is very important. Again, that's over 3 million tests per week. That is sufficient for everyone who needs a test, symptomatic, contact tracing, and to our best projections, the asymptomatic kind of surveillance we need to get that. And that's the way it is. And remember, I work at HHS. I work there every day. I don't get tested every day. I get monitored for my symptoms. Am I febrile? Do I have any other symptoms? I wear a mask when I go in. That's a safe work environment for the environment we have. If I became symptomatic, I would get a test, and if it were positive, I would isolate and there'd be contact tracing to stop that just the way it was done here. If I'm not symptomatic, I do the precautions as everyone is recommended in phase 1, and that's the essence of safely opening America.
And John, the numbers are coming way down, and they're coming down rapidly, and that's a beautiful thing to see. And that's pretty much universally all across the country. They're coming down very rapidly, so very important. Please, go ahead.
Admiral, so Americans who are going back to work shouldn't expect and shouldn't want to have the same thing that people coming to work here at the White House have, which is the ability to get tested regularly, regardless of symptoms?
So let me clarify as well. People who come into close contact with the president get tested on a regular basis, okay? If I were not in close contact with the president specifically, I would not get tested like most people here do not get tested. That's a very specific circumstance. When I work at HHS, I go to HHS, I don't get tested. I do the exact thing that we ask Americans to do, to monitor your symptoms. If you are symptomatic, self-isolate, get tested. With one of our community-based testing sites at your hospitals, there are even at-home testing now that has been authorized. And to cooperate, that if you need to be contact traced, be contact traced and cooperate with your local public health. But not everybody who walks in here gets tested every time they do. If you're symptomatic, here at HHS, at a meatpacking plant, at a school, you need to get tested.
And the meatpacking plants now are doing very well. There's great testing around those plants. And we're finding out who had the problem. They're being quarantined, and the meatpacking is moving along very nicely. But they were trouble spots. They were hot zones, definitely. Please. And you know, one thing I think is very important though, John, just to finish, we have now, and nobody says it, they just don't want to write it, by far more tests than any other country in the world, not even a contest. And the quality of our test is the best anywhere in the world. That's very important to say. Please go ahead.
So to make sure I understand the White House's position, are you saying that right now you feel there is enough testing, adequate testing across the United States, or do you feel that it needs to be ramped up, and by how much, if so, does it need to be ramped up?
I think we've been clear all along that we believe, and the data indicate, we have enough testing to do the phase 1 gradual reopening that has been supported in the president's plan and the task force plan. And it has to be a phased reopening. Nobody's saying turn the light switch on and everyone go, because then it would be really impossible to control the spread of the virus. You know, there are many models out there. The Rockefeller Foundation published their recommendations of about 3 million tests per week. That's exactly what we're doing. If you look at our agent-based models, it's far below that. If you take the Safra Center at Harvard and correct their misassumptions, like on the sensitivity of the test, the mitigation processes, and how many people get hospitalized, you get about that number. Now, I am not going to come here and say we can absolutely swear it's God's truth that this is the number we need. But we know we have enough to open, and we're going to be very careful with our ILI net, with our surveillance programs, and with the data come in to inform us even further as we grow and learn. And I think Brad.
And let me just add a little bit to that, because most days I don't come to the White House to work. I either go to FEMA or I go to HHS. And let me just talk you through what the protocols are there, because I would never get tested if I wasn't coming to the White House. So every day when we come in, we get our temperature taken and we get asked questions about if we have symptoms. If you don't, then you enter the workplace. And then there's hand sanitizer all over the place. In rooms that are made for conference rooms, they put pieces of paper that say don't sit in essentially every other or every third seat to separate people. And so there's a lot of precautions that we're taking in the federal government that are separate from testing. And those are the precautions that the agencies that Admiral Giroir and I are working at every day are using to let us continue working.
If people want to get tested, they get tested. We have the greatest capacity in the world. Not even close. If people want to get tested, they get tested. But for the most part, they shouldn't want to get tested. There's no reason. They feel good. They don't have sniffles. They don't have sore throats. They don't have any problem. If they do feel there's something happening, they have the absolute easy. In fact, Ron DeSantis of Florida, the governor, doing a fantastic job in Florida. He said he's got a little bit of the opposite problem. He's got so much testing that people sit around and wait for people to come in, that they have a great overcapacity for testing, and there are numerous other states that have told me the same thing. That's, by the way, a good problem, not a bad problem, okay? Yeah, go ahead, please.
Said many times that the U.S. is doing far better than any other country when it comes to testing.
Yes.
Why does that matter? Why is this a global competition to you if everyday Americans are still losing their lives and we're still seeing more cases every day?
Well, they're losing their lives everywhere in the world, and maybe that's a question you should ask China. Don't ask me, ask China that question, okay? When you ask them that question, you may get a very unusual answer. Yes, behind you, please.
Sir, why are you saying that to me specifically?
I'm telling you, I'm not saying it specifically to anybody. I'm saying it to anybody that would ask a nasty question like that.
That's not a nasty question.
Please go ahead.
Why does it matter?
Okay, anybody else? Please, go ahead in the back, please.
I have two
No,
questions.
it's okay.
But
We'll
you
go over
pointed
here.
to me. I have two questions, Mr.
Next,
President.
next, please.
But you called on me.
I did, and you didn't respond, and now I'm calling on
Sorry, I just
the
wanted
young lady in the back, please.
I just wanted to let my colleague finish.
Okay.
But can I ask you a
Ladies
question?
and gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Question and going after another.
Now has the capacity to do.
Rather than allowing Caitlin Collins of CNN to ask her question, President called an end to the news conference after a dust-up question and answer with an Asian reporter over why he called out China. She asked a perfectly legitimate question about why inject global competition into testing when the death toll is still rising, and perhaps mirroring what is going to be over and over again said in defense of this administration. His reply was, "Don't ask me, ask China." An interesting White House press conference. Let's say at the outset, none of the established medical experts were there today. So for Americans wanting to hear from a representative of the CDC, for example, that was not possible today. No Dr. Birx, of course, the CDC director, and Dr. Fauci are going through a kind of limited quarantine after coming into contact with a positive case. The president came out with a declarative statement. It took a long time in his remarks before he got to expressing anything about the rising death toll in our country, and even then he couched it as part of a global problem. He said, quote, "We have met the moment and we have prevailed." When questioned about that later, he said he meant testing, that he meant testing. The Admiral has clearly learned to back up the Commander-in-Chief. His first words out of his mouth were, "Thank you, Mr. President, for your leadership." There was a lot about testing, as you might imagine. We do have great testing capacity. at the White House were doing it, said the president. He was asked a lot about the positive cases they've had about face masks. He said, we've learned a lot. The American people have learned a lot about face masks, the good and the bad, by the way, indicating there was a downside to face masks. He said it's not one-sided. Did not elaborate on that, but he said the wearing of face masks included the good and the bad. He went after China asked a question about the hacking issue. He said, I'm not happy with China. About China, he asked rhetorically, what else is new? About the fourth quarter into next calendar year, I think it's something that's going to be very special. The only people who can mess that up, in the president's telling, are the Democrats. About the pediatric illness that is affecting children out of nowhere and has killed several, especially in the New York area. The president said children recover from that. Well, the admiral was called upon to correct that, which he did indeed do. He said most children recover from that. There have been fatalities. In something that in plain English didn't come out right, the president said one of the things we were most proud of, deaths per 100,000 people. He ranked us alongside Germany. The point he was trying to make is that we're at the lowest of the industrialized world in deaths per 100,000 people in population. Didn't quite translate that way. Continuing to go through my notes, an exchange with Yamiche Alcindor about the Ahmaud Arbery case in Georgia. President said he called the one black Republican senator, and that's Tim Scott, not from Georgia, but from South Carolina, who confirmed to the president he was troubled by it. But on testing, which will be the headline from this press availability, here are some quotes from the president. Americans should all be able to get a test right now. If somebody wants to get tested right now, they'll be able to get tested. He added, not everybody should get a test, but then he repeated, if people want to get tested, they get tested. He said in Florida, the governor told him, people sit around and wait for people to get in. They have an overabundance of testing there. And then at the end, of course, when asked why the emphasis on comparing nations of the 184 nations he constantly mentions, why that kind of competition in the face of this death toll, he said, don't ask me, ask China. It's a lot, but it is every time we cover one of these events, and with us to talk about it, Robert
It's obvious. And then he didn't answer it.
Yeah,
So I don't even know.
And then he suggested, and then he suggested things will be coming forward in the next few weeks, so you'll see. But he refused to answer. He did accuse the former president of the United States of committing, in his words, and I'm paraphrasing him once again, the greatest crime in American history. Let me play this clip. Stand by for a moment.
That matter? Why is this a global competition to you if every day Americans are still losing their lives and we're still seeing more cases every day?
Well, they're losing their lives everywhere in the world, and maybe that's a question you should ask China. Don't ask me, ask China that question, okay? When you ask them that question, you may get a very unusual answer. Yes, behind you, please.
What, sir, why are you saying that to me specifically?
I'm telling you, I'm not saying it specifically to anybody. I'm saying it to anybody that would ask a nasty question like that.
That's not a nasty question.
Please go ahead.
Why does it matter?
Okay, anybody else? Please, go ahead.
Certainly was not a nasty question. Gloria, it was really awkward to see that unfold, and I give our White House correspondent, Caitlin Collins, a lot of credit for deferring to that colleague of hers who was asking a reasonable question, and the president said to this Asian American, go ask China about that.
Well, I think I give the journalist a lot of credit, because what she is saying is, are you being racist in asking that question of me? Now, he denied it, but you can judge for yourself, Wolf. There he was saying to her, ask China. Why would he do that? And, you know, I think this isn't the first time this has occurred from this president, and I think that, you know, she she had a lot of guts in saying to him, are you asking me this because because of my appearance and who I am?
Yeah, which was a fair question and a fair response. Caitlin Collins is with us right now. Caitlin, you were there on the scene. Give us your sense of what happened on several related issues, and as Gloria correctly points out, the president accusing the former President Barack Obama of committing the greatest crime, Obamagate, he keeps calling it, although when pressed, what crime did he commit? He didn't have an answer for that. Said, stick around, maybe you'll see something in the next few weeks.
Yeah, Wolf, he said the answer to that question was obvious, though he did not state what it was if he feels it's so obvious. And, of course, a strange end there to the press conference where the president had called on me. I was letting my colleague Wei Zhang from CBS finish her question, and then the president abruptly ended the press conference, did not let me ask my questions. We had multiple questions, of course, for the president. He had not called on us yet. And this was not only about testing, but also the president is facing questions about the coronavirus outbreak happening here at the White House and what he is going to do moving forward with his relationship with the vice president, who notably was not there. Wolf, I don't think that has ever happened in our time here at the White House, where the vice president has been here in Washington at the White House and not attended a press conference that the president was having. So clearly some kind of separation happening there. But then when the president was asked at the end, what his point of this entire press conference was to talk about testing and to talk about how his administration has ramped it up. And he repeatedly was talking about where the United States falls in the world ranking of who is doing the most testing not only, overall, but also per capita. And when the reporter at the end was asking why that is such an important thing for him to stress, why does he keep talking about that as in, a global ranking, basically, that's when he got irritated at the end when he was telling Wei Zhang to ask China that answer to that question. And Wolf, we had several other questions for the president, including about his own decisions that he's made, what he's going to do going forward after he decided not to self-quarantine, after his personal valet tested positive for coronavirus. We've seen several officials who came in contact with the vice president's press secretary decide to self-quarantine after they had sustained periods of contact, though that is not an option that the vice president himself is taking. And of course, Wolf, the other thing you noticed that was different in that press conference today out in the Rose Garden than what we've seen in any others is that the staffers are wearing masks, the ones you saw standing alongside the colonnade, even the Health and Human Services Secretary, Jared Kushner, another official that they've hired to come and help with testing. The guests were wearing masks, but the president himself was not wearing a mask. And we know previously when the CDC issued that guidance at the beginning of April, saying they believe people should cover their face when in public and they couldn't socially distance from others, that the president said he was not going to follow that. So the question is he also not going to follow this new requirement that staffers entering the West Wing should all be wearing masks? So a lot of questions to the president, Wolf, but he did not take any from CNN there at the end.
Yeah, certainly.
While we were driving down, away from where I was sitting, and covered me and my buddy.
Said about testing.
As far as Americans getting a test, they should all be able to get a test right now. They should be able to get a test. That's the problem with a question like that. We go through a whole announcement saying we're #1 in the world by far, by a factor of 2 and even 3 and 4, depending on where you're looking. And I get a question, when will everybody be able to get tested? If somebody wants to be tested right now, they'll be able to be tested.
Dr. Gupta, back up to you. Explain to people in the moments after hearing that again, how the president can be right that by whatever metric he is using, we lead the world in testing. Just don't ask about a percentage of our population, but also explain how it is. To Andy's point, you can live in a poor community in this country. You can be an essential employee in this country and have no idea how you could get a test.
Brian, fundamentally, to get a test, you can't just walk up and say, I want a test, which is what the president is implying, that anybody who says on demand, I want this, I'm going to get it. That's not how it works. The CDC has said repeatedly, and if you go on their website right now, it's pretty clear, anybody has to have symptoms. What does that mean? That means you need to see a nurse practitioner or a physician to get a test. What's the big overarching problem in our country when it comes to health system inequities, access to healthcare? We know that certain, as Andy said, certain zip codes are better serviced than others. So if you don't have durable access to healthcare, you're not going to get a test that easily. We know that African Americans make up 13% of the US population, but 27% of the deaths. There's a reason behind that, and that's healthcare access, pre-existing inequities that are worsened by this outbreak. So let's just be clear on that. And I will also just quickly add quality of tests. This Abbott test he keeps referencing, by the way, it only has an 85% sensitivity. So for every 1,000 individuals that get that test, 150 get the wrong answer. So he needs to stop talking about that test.
100 nights to try it. I'll be 10 by then, so I'm at...
Ministerial exemption apply to that kind of thing.
He said, paraphrasing here, we mourn for those who've lost a loved one. He stopped himself, mentioned that that was worldwide, mentioned the 184 nations again, because it always helps his argument to call it an invisible enemy, to paint the United States as just one of these 184. And then indeed later, he couched it in global terms, as if to escape any liability, talking about when he's asked about models, he does this every day. The model, had he done nothing, and comparing current performance. As you look at the models, as of this afternoon, where are we headed?
Well, look, let's first to the world comparison. If you look around the world, whether it's Greece, the Czech Republic, New Zealand, Vietnam, Hong Kong, there are countries around the world that are successfully, safely opening up their economy. Italy, because they've done a very nice job of sticking to their strategy, and they have reduced the case count. We are sitting here in the class of a very small number of countries, Brazil, Iran, Russia, that have leveled off at a very high rate. And if you look at the map that you're showing now, Brian, we have leveled off at a high rate, but it's misleading, because if you take out the Northeast, the rest of the country is growing at about 15 to 20% of new cases. So as we all have come to learn about the lag that exists here, what shows up in case counts today shows up in hospitalizations in a couple of weeks, shows up in ICU beds a week or two after that, and shows up in fatality rates sometime after that. So it will be sometime in June when we experience the reality of the policies that are being put in place today. If people are being less careful today than they were a month ago, then you have every reason to believe that death counts are going to be much higher than they are today. So we all have to be...
Green dot is...
Thank you for everything you do.
To a world of possibilities.
Scientists and those doctors, and the vice president presumably should be very, very cautious right now, even though he's tested regularly, almost every day presumably, comes out negative, but sometimes there are false negatives, 15% or so of these relatively fast tests unfolding. I want to bring in Daniel Dale, our CNN fact checker, to talk a little bit about the president's assertion that anyone who wants a test can get a test. Tell us what you're discovering, and you've looked into this closely, Daniel.
I have, Wolf. I think you and our colleagues have basically covered it. It's just not true that anyone who wants one can get one, and in many places there are still restrictions on who is even eligible. There are jurisdictions that are still testing people, only people who have symptoms. I thought it was interesting that Brett Giroir tried to amend or add a caveat to the president's claim. He came up and said that you can get a test if you need one, if you're symptomatic, if you're being a contact trace because you might have had contact with someone who has tested positive. And then the president came back up and returned to the original claim. He said, if you want one, you can get one. This was after Giroir tried to help him out. And I think it's another example of how hard it can be to budge the president from his inaccurate talking points. Wolf, I think it's also important to provide context on what the president and other administration officials are boasting about with regard to per capita testing as it relates to South Korea's. So I think their numbers are now accurate, or roughly accurate. The US is now doing much more testing per capita than South Korea. But it's important to note that the US and South Korea had their first confirmed case right around the same time, and South Korea jumped to a huge lead in the number of tests per capita it was conducting. And that allowed South Korea to crush its curve. South Korea had 34 reported new cases yesterday. That was the highest number in a month. They've had fewer than 300 deaths, where again, the U.S. has passed 80,000. So yes, the U.S. has jumped ahead now as of April in per capita testing, but in those crucial early weeks, South Korea was far outpacing the U.S., and experts say that is a significant reason why South Korea has done so much better than the U.S. in handling this outbreak.
Very important point indeed, and let's not lose sight of the big picture right now. Just moments ago, 80,000 Americans have now been confirmed to have died from the coronavirus. 80,000. Here's some perspective, and I just checked. 2 months ago, on March 12th, exactly almost 2 months ago, there were 38 deaths in the United States. 38 deaths 2 months ago, 80,000 deaths, specifically right now, 80,087 deaths in the United States. So 80,000 people have died as a result of the coronavirus in only 2 months. 38, look at how fast that went. And Sanjay, I want your perspective on this. Even some of the best estimates out there, some of the modeling, some of the forecasting, is by early August, that number can be 130 or 135,000 Americans dead.
Yeah, I mean, when this particular organization, IHME, changed their projections here, I mean, it was a significant change, Wolf. You remember they had gone up from around 60,000 to 72,000, then basically within a couple of days went to this number that was almost double that. And some of the initial projections really did not account for the states reopening, so these newer projections are starting to try and account for the states reopening, but still unclear just how much mobility there will be. It looks like people are really starting to move around a lot. I mean, there are these polls that were out, Wolf, you remember, as states were considering reopening. If your state reopens, how likely are you to actually go out and do some of these things? And still, the majority of people said that they wouldn't, but this mobility data, which they track by using anonymous cell phone data, seems to suggest that people are moving around quite a bit, Wolf. So, sad to say, and again, as I've said so many times over the last few months, I don't...
President and Vice President have tested positive, including Dr. Fauci, the head of the CDC, and other top health officials. They are now in self-quarantine. NBC's Jeff Bennett has the latest, including the new safety precautions in the West Wing.
This morning, the coronavirus crisis affecting both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue. White House sources shooting down reports that Vice President Mike Pence, who chairs the coronavirus task force, would self-quarantine after his top spokesperson, Katie Miller, tested positive. She's also married to one of President Trump's top policy advisors, Stephen Miller. White House officials telling NBC News the vice president continues to test negative and has no restrictions to his schedule. On Capitol Hill, Tennessee Senator Lamar Alexander will remotely chair a hearing focused on safely returning to work and school after one of his staffers tested positive. 3 of the top witnesses for that hearing, Dr. Anthony Fauci, CDC Director Robert Redfield, and FDA Commissioner Stephen Hahn, are also self-quarantining and are expected to appear by video conference.
It is scary to go to work. I was not part of the White House in March. I think that I'd be a lot safer if I was sitting at home than I would be going to the West Wing. But, it's a time when people have to step up and serve their country.
The discovery of the 2 infected staffers, including one of the president's personal valets, prompting the White House to ramp up its safety procedures. White House officials tell NBC News testing and temperature checks have been boosted throughout the West Wing. Senior staff who interact with the president are being tested daily. Some staffers in the president's residence are now wearing masks. And the entire West Wing is being sanitized on an even more frequent basis. The difficulty containing the virus at the White House, where testing is widely available, highlights the challenge facing businesses nationwide that lack those same resources. But that could get easier, with the FDA now announcing that it's given emergency authorization for a new type of coronavirus test called an antigen test. Health experts say it's generally cheaper and easier to manufacture than current methods, and the results are faster too. The FDA says the antigen test could potentially scale to test millions of Americans per day. It comes as former President Barack Obama is speaking out about the Trump administration's handling of the pandemic during a phone conference with members of the Obama Alumni Association, the audio obtained by Yahoo News.
It would have been bad even with the best of governments. It has been an absolute chaotic disaster.
The story will continue to keep a close eye on there. A deadline, meanwhile, is looming. If you would like to get your coronavirus economic impact money electronically, the IRS stating Wednesday's the last day that you're going to be able to enter your banking information to have your stimulus check deposited directly into your account. You should visit the Get My Payment tool on irs.gov to provide your direct deposit information. After the deadline, the IRS will begin preparing files for paper checks that should begin arriving through late May. A doctor is now making news for a picture on Twitter showing a very crowded United Airlines flight from New York to San Francisco. Dr. Ethan Weiss's 6-hour trip happened over the weekend. This was Saturday. The picture showing what appears to be most of the seats on that flight filled. Noteworthy because United recently stated it would implement social distancing policies on its flights. A spokesperson for the company wouldn't say how many were on the flight, but noted it had, quote, a higher than average load factor, but it still departed with empty seats. The South Korean Ministry of Health announcing 35 new coronavirus cases on Sunday, 29 of which were locally transmitted and related to a nightclub. A total of 79 cases related to nightclubs have been reported as of this morning, so several cities have ordered now the closure again of clubs and similar entertainment venues. Seoul collected 5,500 names of people who visited the nightclubs between April 24th and May 6th. Reaching more than 2,000 of them, at least 3,000 others could not be reached, at least immediately, and they plan to track them down. A few of the other stories happening across the globe this Monday. We're going to be back in just another minute with a look at your forecast, and State Senator Troy Heiner is going to be joining us live on the phone.
The Attorney General, he clearly says it was about upholding the rule of law in his opinion. But here's the thing, Jesse, they acknowledged the mistake and then they corrected it. And we all make mistakes in the business of journalism. I think the problem comes in when people either try to deny it or try to hide it. And in this case, NBC did neither. They admitted it and they owned up to it. So to my mind, what I get troubled by is the idea that, and I think you said this to me last week. You said, hey, you know what, winners write their history. Okay, and even if you think that in the current writing under Bill Barr that somehow justice has been upheld, I think it's important to note that when it comes to matters of law, what happens when people testify, when they admit to guilt in court twice on 2 occasions, it matters. No matter if you're the winner or loser, facts, admissions of guilt should matter, as should evidence introduced. But apparently, that didn't matter to a man who was supposed to run our justice system.
Well, I think it was Obama's own AG, Eric Holder, that dismissed a case of perjury against a Republican senator, Mr. Stevens, but that's neither here nor there. Greg, Juan says this is a mistake, but all of these mistakes keep making the president look bad. So is it really a mistake again?
Yeah, they all go in the same direction. So it's true, the media, everybody makes mistakes. We can forgive that. But when they uniformly go in one direction, something's wrong. So when people gripe about Trump being obsessed with the media, he's only doing the job that the media won't do. You know, they don't actually police. Would they have apologized if they weren't caught? And I'm wondering, part of the great thing about social media is that there's a lot of little police officers out there who've had it, who see that the media is broken and are holding their feet to the fire. I personally think Chuck Todd has blood on his hands. That's what he said. Remember he said that last week?
Tim Russert would never make a mistake like that.
Yeah, remember, yes, he suggested Trump had blood on his hands, what, last week? So he, tit for tat.
Kagan?
4 years of peddling a phony Russia collusion fable, and now some networks are like, we're not even talking about it. Let's move on, move on. Why are you talking about the Flynn case? I can't believe they're trying to. My mother always used to ask, why do those people on those other networks always look like they're smelling something? Well, I can say definitively to her now it's because they've been hacking up for years a bunch of hot garbage, and the air must be rancid.
And we'll finish with, you, Dana, it looks like this interview was done on Thursday with CBS and Boulevard, and on Sunday, Meet the Press ran it. So that's 3 days they had to make sure this was right.
Yeah. Yeah, and to Greg's point about social media, it's like all these people out there are able to make citizens arrests now.
And why he went after Ouija there, and then seemed to be upset with Caitlin Collins from CNN, who he's also gone after in the past and accused of either asking nasty questions or entirely ignoring her. What we do know is that the president ended that press conference abruptly. I don't think there's anything that's unclear about that. And that earlier in the press conference, he went out of his way to escalate ever so slightly his rhetoric on China. Number one, he seemed to suggest that China wanted to renegotiate a trade deal and that he wouldn't do it. And number two, he seemed to suggest that they're aware of these reports, or they're aware that Chinese may, and I stress may because we haven't confirmed this at NBC, may be hacking as it relates to a possible vaccine. So his rhetoric on China was slightly, with a stress on slightly, hotter than it was in the first part of the press conference. And as to the specifics of why he picked on Ouija and why he went after Ouija there, I think it's best for me not to speculate, but we can all watch and see what happened.
Well, she did say the term, I guess, was Kung Flu, that a White House advisor used to her early on in this pandemic. Hans Nichols. Hans, thank you very much. And more than 2 months after the first COVID-19 case was first confirmed in the United States, and more than 4 months after the virus was first detected in China, there are still a lot of unknowns and a lot of mystery surrounding this virus, including a new illness related to COVID-19 that's affecting children. It's being called pediatric multi-system inflammatory syndrome. Minutes ago, President Trump downplayed the severity of that illness.
Again, it's a tiny percentage, but you're right. So we're looking into it very strongly. And the Admiral, as he said, he's known about this for long before this happened. But it is a very, very small percentage. And people recover from that. The children recover from that.
With me now is Dr. Megan Rainey, emergency physician and associate professor of emergency medicine at Brown University's Alpert Medical School. So, Doctor, thank you very much, first off. This is something that's concerning parents out there. They're waking up and they're looking at their kids. Some might see a rash. I speak for myself. I saw a rash on my kid the other day and I got really nervous. What exactly are doctors seeing, and what should parents be on alert for?
Katie, thank you. As a parent myself, I also have concern. I think parents everywhere are looking at their kids in a different way. Up until really recently, we were told that kids might catch COVID-19, but they weren't going to get sick from it. Now, the president is right that this new illness, this new syndrome, is very, very rare among kids with COVID-19. We think that it's a post-infectious complication, so kids that had COVID-19 maybe had few symptoms to begin with, develop it as an after effect from an inflammatory disorder or from their immune system kind of acting up. But what's scary about it is that we thought that the kids were okay and now they're not. Now, what should we look out for? The biggest thing, of course, is to try to keep our kids safe in the first place. So social distancing, masks, washing our kids' hands. The second thing is, if your kid's not acting right, call their pediatrician or family practice doctor or bring them to an ER, particularly if they've had a fever for more than 4 or 5 days, if they're really not acting like themselves. In terms of rashes, it's that discoloration of the fingers, toes, lips, or severe trouble breathing or vomiting. Those would all be things that would make me worried. And I'll say, as scientists, we are doing our best to figure it out and to get treatments. It is rare, but any death in a kid is too often. Mm-hmm.
Are these kids with underlying conditions? Are they kids who seem otherwise healthy? What do we know about the kids it's so far infected?
So there was just a publication out today looking at kids in New York City who were hospitalized, and it showed that most of them did have underlying conditions, but with this new inflammatory illness, it looks like some of them may actually be kids who were perfectly healthy before they caught COVID-19, which is particularly scary to us as doctors and parents.
Why is there still so much we don't know about this virus?
You know, when you look at this virus, as you said a few minutes ago, it has been around for 4 months. Scientists have literally been working at breakneck speed to try to identify the virus, figure out who gets sick and why, identify what happens after someone gets sick, and develop tests. Now, compare this to HIV. It took us years to identify the virus for HIV, to develop tests, and to even identify how it was transmitted. We already have all those things for COVID-19, but we just don't know all the details yet. You know, the American public is getting to see science in all of its messiness, which is both glorious but also kind of scary and causes a lot of uncertainty. You know, within the medical field, we're used to reading studies and waiting, saying this is interesting, but we're going to wait until the gold standard comes out. We don't have that luxury with COVID-19, but the trouble is if we chase that promising result too quickly, it results in drama like we had around hydroxychloroquine, right? Which Trump said was a game changer, and now we know actually doesn't work and may even cause harm. So the big thing here is patience and being comfortable with uncertainty, which is not something that any of us want in the midst of a pandemic.
Well, pull back the curtain for us, because what you have with this disease that you don't have with most other diseases is that there are so many people that are infected with it right now, and hospitals around the world are seeing patients and they're gathering all of that data. This patient has this symptoms, this patient has these underlying conditions, this patient has these attributes. How do you, as a scientific community, look at all of that information, go through it, and then formulate diagnoses or formulate a good idea of who this might affect over who it might not affect?
Absolutely, Katie. So we talk in science about there being kind of grades or levels of evidence. And the first step is, like you described, just observing, saying who's getting sick, what are the characteristics of the people who are getting sick, what are the characteristics of the people that are getting better, and using that to try to create predictions and descriptions and to create hypotheses. The next step is to do prospective studies, to collect data in advance and to watch people going forward, or better yet, to do a randomized trial where it's like a coin flip. We say this person gets this treatment and this person that gets this treatment, and we compare the outcomes among those two groups. The observational studies are the easiest. They're also the lowest quality of evidence, and that's what we're seeing right now for a lot of new treatments. It's what we saw early with remdesivir. The next level are those forward-looking studies and those randomized studies, which are just starting to come out. And you're right, because there are so many patients who are sick, sadly, it also gives us the opportunity to have results a little more quickly. And I'm hopeful that we're going to start to see more positive studies that give us some hope in the next weeks and months.
King, after it tells you to put a mask on.
Wow. What, Jesse? You're going to get one of these. I know you are. For one of your many estates.
Yeah, the first time I looked at that thing, I just wanted to kick it, Gutfeld. I mean, maybe that would last in Singapore, but if you had that thing in America, it wouldn't last like 2 minutes. Kids would be slide tackling it, running their cars over it, throwing it into the pond. I mean, they'd be stealing it and selling its parts. Like, that would never last in.
Restaurants in Phoenix are now allowed to reopen their dining rooms with restrictions. Restaurants are also opening their dining rooms in Nashville, although live music venues in the Music City are still closed. Let's bring in Vaughn Hilliard.
No, I would not. We have not met the moment. We have not prevailed. Saying we have prevailed at this point is like being at mile 10 of a 26-mile marathon and raising your hands in victory. That is not where we're at right now. We've got a whole lot of work left to do. And at this point, in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, we're recognizing where we are in this race, and we're keeping our nose to the grindstone.
The White House says that it will now allocate $11 billion in previously appropriated funds to states to increase their testing capacity. How much of a difference will all this make in your ability to reopen your beautiful city of Minneapolis quickly and safely?
Testing is going to be perhaps the critical component of opening safely. It's got to be testing, followed by tracing, followed by isolating for those who have come up with positive tests. And that's actually exactly how we're collaborating with our state right now. We've got a wonderful partnership with our state, our University of Minnesota, and then the Mayo Clinic, and we hope to be able to get up to 20,000 tests per day. Right now we're hovering around 5,000. And yes, in order to do this properly, in order to do this with our eyes wide open and responding to the data, we're going to need more tests.
Why hasn't the curve of new cases in Minnesota flattened already?
Well, in Minnesota, we took fairly aggressive action very early on, and so we did not get those spikes from the get-go. And in Minnesota, because we've been so effective at extending the curve, that's a big part of why we're seeing ascending numbers right now. In other words, rather than have a huge spike early on, the numbers increase over time. And the second piece is naturally, with an increase in tests, you're going to see an increase in positive numbers. And we're not shying away from the results here. We're not hiding from the realities. We're actually going into some of these hot spots. We're going into our senior centers. We're going into congregate care facilities. We're going into food processing plants. These are areas where we can expect to have higher rates of contraction. And we're testing there, and yes, we are seeing positives as well. And so as we are seeing an ascension right now in the number of cases, we've also given ourselves some time to prepare. Because here's an important piece that people seem to be missing oftentimes. By doing all of this affirmative work, we are not preventing the total number of people from contracting COVID-19. We are preventing the total number of people from contracting COVID-19 all at once. And that's an important distinguishing factor, especially as we gradually being the key word, start to reopen.
Well, good luck to everybody in Minneapolis. Good luck to everybody in Minnesota right now. We'll stay in close touch, Mayor Fry, with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we're going to have much more on all the breaking news.